Alright, so in this fourth section, I'm going to talk about The Graduate, and as you're listening to my lecture here, pay very careful attention to how I talk about this movie and the way I break down scenes, I analyze scenes from a very visual perspective. Again, this is what's expected in your papers, and especially if you're doing the audio commentary. You can't just describe things using the cinematic language. You have to use cinematic language to help break down the meaning of whatever's on the screen. And remember, you need to choose a straight 30-minute scene. Do not jump from scene to scene like I'm doing here, because I'm doing it so I can talk about the whole movie. For you, I just want a straight 30-minute scene. Listen to the example I gave you so you know. Alright, so let's talk about The Graduate. Graduate is directed by Mike Nichols, and this was the second film that he did. Nichols is an interesting character in that he had established a long and successful career as a director in theater. And the couple years before The Graduate, he had done a film called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And this film is considered, again, a kind of groundbreaking work that really challenged the production code. I believe it's available as an instant watch feature, and it's definitely worth checking out. It's a very small drama that basically the whole movie involves four people, and there's a certain honesty and openness about these very kind of adult themes of adultery and abortion and alcoholism that this film covers. And again, in that sense, it was very challenging to the production code. So then his next project was this, The Graduate. And it's really hard to understate just how big a deal this movie was, especially since it's such a small film that you watch this movie and it doesn't seem like it would be a huge blockbuster, but in fact it was. It was such a huge hit that it took Hollywood totally by surprise. They didn't think it would be as huge as it was, and it's one of the reasons that the new Hollywood became what it did, because when this movie made it big, the studios realized, oh my, we have no idea what we're doing. Let's just kind of keep making weird films, and hopefully they'll all be as big as The Graduate. And so, how big is The Graduate? Well, think about it this way. Get a chance, do a Google search for top grossing films adjusted for inflation, and you might find something very interesting. Once you adjust for inflation, a lot of these are record-breaking movies like Titanic or Avatar. They start falling down on that list because obviously when ticket prices are more expensive, it's easier to make more money. So even though Avatar has made a gazillion dollars, when adjusted for inflation, it's really only number 14. Return of the Jedi is 15. Raiders of the Lost Ark is 17. And there's the lowly Graduate at number 19. In fact, take a look at what's number 20. Take a look at all the movies that are surrounding The Graduate. Those are the sort of traditional big budget box office smashers, right? The big special effects movies, the summer blockbusters, the movies made for kids and teenagers, what have you. The Graduate is a strange movie in that it doesn't really fit with all those other films. Alright, so let's take a look at some scenes from The Graduate. And I want to start at the very opening shot. Right? Now, if you recall the meaning of the word motif, right? A pattern, an image that repeats again and again. And there are sort of several key motifs that we'll be looking at. And one is this kind of extreme close-up of Benjamin's face that we come to again and again. And in this opening shot, it starts with that sort of extreme close-up. It zooms out into an extreme wide shot, right? Showing him in this airplane. And there's this great sense of alienation that, like, you do this extreme close-up, it makes him seem like he's alone, that he's by himself, and it zooms out and he's surrounded by people, but essentially he's still, in truth, alone, right? There's like a sense of isolation. And now he's on this sort of walking sidewalk, and notice the way he just sort of stands there, right? People just walk past him. In other words, there's a certain passiveness about him that he's not taking charge. There's no sense of purpose. He's not moving. He's being moved. Right? For those of you who might have seen Fight Club, there's a similarity to that. Like the way in which Ed Norton's character in the first part of Fight Club is talking about how like all of life seems artificial, and that you sort of purchase lifestyles and you don't really do anything that's genuine or authentic. And again, so it's this idea that Benjamin here is simply a tool in this machine, that he's done everything he's supposed to, right? He went to high school and then he goes to a nice college and he's sort of following the classic middle class dream. And you watch this movie and you think like, wow, this kid has everything. He gets this fancy Italian sports car from his dad as a graduation gift. His parents have a lot of money. He has a life of leisure. So you think, well, what's his problem? His problem is that like all those things ultimately are destroying him because they have no meaning. And then they had this great cut from Benjamin to the suitcase. And notice the suitcase is the same color, is essentially the same color as Benjamin's suit, right? In other words, Benjamin and the suitcase are really one and the same. There is a kind of, again, a passiveness. Now, the fact that this movie opens at an airport is not insignificant. The fact that I think it opens at an airport in some ways for the same reason that Guess Who's Coming to Dinner also opens at an airport. The airport represents something. As I'll talk about in more detail when talking about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the airport is a relatively air travel is relatively new, mass air travel that is, and it represents this kind of new frontier, this new technology. In other words, it represents the future. And so to have like these two movies that again are sort of groundbreaking in their own ways, starting with the airport, is a message to the audience that these movies are very much invested in this idea of the future, in this idea of what tomorrow will bring. So let's return now to The Graduate and look at some more scenes. And I want to start here by going back to that opening shot of Benjamin in the airplane, right? Again, that extreme close-up, because once after the closing credits are done, we come to this shot. Again, a close-up of Benjamin in essentially the same position. And notice here behind him is this aquarium, and this is going to be another major motif, this idea of a glass cage, right? That you don't see it, you don't recognize it, but essentially we're all animals in a cage. And there is behind him, the father's head is obscuring it, but there's behind him a little toy diver, right? And if you recall, that diver is an image that shows up again when Benjamin is asked to sort of show off a birthday present by going into the swimming pool with a scuba tank. There is this sense, again, that this is supposed to be Benjamin's big moment. He's just graduated, they're having a big party, but he feels completely disconnected because he doesn't feel excited for his future the way that his parents think that he should be. Right? For him, there's something almost a matter of dread. Also, take a look at this clown here, right? This painting of a clown. And this is an example of the significance of the mise-en-scène, that the clown is just simply a part of the decoration, part of the house, but it's more than that, because it's almost there to symbolize this kind of tragic comedy that is, again, Benjamin's life, right? That he's very much like this clown, that he's supposed to be happy, but when you look closely, the clown is a very sad clown. Now, this, of course, is when Mrs. Robinson first enters the picture, and she is beginning that process of seducing Ben. When she entered the room, he was there staring at the fish tank, right? So again, we return to the image of the glass cage. And when they are getting ready to leave the room, when Benjamin is ready to take her home, you're going to see that they're going to show the camera shot through the fish tank again. Almost as if Benjamin is now officially in the tank, right? That he is slowly in the process of becoming just like his parents, becoming as boring, as um, well, I guess we'll go so far as to say mindless, to be as numb as his parents and his friends. There is the sense that he's losing any kind of youthful energy, uh, kind of optimism about the future, all that kind of stuff. And again, that's what we're going to see throughout this film. This kind of, at least the first part of this film, this disintegration of his spirit, right? And here's that shot I was talking about. So here he gets the keys, and the camera stays here as you see them moving through, again, as if they were actually in the aquarium. Now, when they get to Mrs. Robinson's house, they go to the back of the house where there's this bar, right? And again, more glass walls. They're constantly surrounded by these glass walls, constantly in these, again, glass cages. They are inside an aquarium, essentially. When Benjamin finally decides to pursue this affair with Mrs. Robinson and they meet at the hotel, you notice that the hotel also is full of glass walls. When he calls her from the payphone at the hotel, that payphone, of course, also has glass walls, right? It's just again and again this motif of the glass wall. Now here's that montage sequence that I talked about before, where we're going to see those repeated close-ups of Benjamin. And this is ultimately, now he's sort of fallen completely over. He's become dead inside, and there is a certain repetition, right? That all he does is he floats by, that again his life has become passive. He's not doing anything active. He's not taking charge of his life. He just simply goes from his parents' house to the hotel room with Mrs. Robinson, back and forth, back and forth. You know, at the beginning of the movie, you learn that he used to run track, he doesn't smoke, and now all he does is sit around, drink beer, and smoke. Right? There is the sense that he's, in many ways, given up. And this, I think, is the reason meeting Elaine becomes such a revelation. Because if you recall, the thing that happens to make him change his mind about Elaine is that he basically treats her like crap, and then she cries. And it's at that moment when he sees her crying that his attitude changes, that everything changes. Because in Elaine now, for the first time, he is seeing a genuine emotion. He is seeing something that's real, something that's missing in his life, right? This kind of emotional authenticity. Because if you look at this, I mean, look at his face, it's expressionless. He's just going, again, from room to room to room, this kind of clever little montage sequence, and there's no joy, right? There's no pleasure in anything that he does. I mean, you know, he's basically out having this affair and he's having plenty of sex, but he's doing it like a robot. There's no pleasure in it whatsoever. But again, with Elaine, I mean, because when you think about that, relationship with Elaine is crazy. They barely know each other, and yet, you know, he's formed this connection with her that it defies all logic. And that connection exists, again, only because it's the only time that he feels any kind of authentic or real emotion. Simply put, though, Elaine and Benjamin have no real connection other than this kind of idea that they don't want to be like their parents, right? That's the only thing that they share. And that, I think, explains this sort of incredibly poignant ending. This isn't a sort of typical romantic comedy happy ending where they're going to live happily ever after, because, in fact, there is no basis for their relationship. And when you think about any romantic comedy, you know, two people meet, they fall in love, and really they don't know each other that well, right? And this is sort of exploiting that idea, like, you know, there's this excitement that, like, they finally rebelled from their parents. They sort of told their parents, you know, we're not going to be like you. We're going to be free. The only problem is they don't exactly know what they want to do, right? In many ways, Benjamin is back at the beginning. He's alienated. He's alone. He still has no real sense of direction, right? The only difference is that at least now there's someone with him who also has no sense of direction. And you look at this image again. This is returning to the close-up of Benjamin, where before he was camera right, he's still camera right, but again, there's someone to his left. All right, so that's been my lecture on The Graduate. And aside from giving you some additional insight into the movie, I also hope that this has provided you with some help in putting together your final paper. For those of you who are doing the paper, think about how I sort of connected various scenes together, right? That I was focusing on establishing certain ideas and getting those ideas by, again, taking scenes from the beginning, middle, and end and putting them together in a new way to show certain connections. Now, a word of warning for those of you who are doing the audio project, who are doing the audio commentary. You should not do what I did here. That is, I showed you various scenes throughout the movie. For your audio commentary, I want you to choose a 30-minute slice of the movie. So it has to be a straight 30 minutes. It can be the first 30 minutes, it can be 30 minutes in the middle, or the last 30 minutes, but it has to be just a 30-minute slice. So whatever you do, don't cut up pieces and jump around in the movie. Because basically what's going to happen is as you begin your commentary, and again in the directions, the first thing you have to say in your commentary is what exact starting time you're beginning at, because I'm going to cue up the movie and I'm going to watch the movie as you make your commentary. So it's very important that you have just a straight 30-minute slice. All right, good luck on your quiz, and I'll talk to you guys again next week.